Well, good morning, folks. This is Lake Granbury's edition of ROP World and News Report. Today's date is May the 8th. Well, actually, that's not quite true. It's May the 7th. I'm recording this at the very last minute so I could give you the most up-to-date news. Hope you're having a great day, and let's get started. So today, how did I get this day's list of questions? First of all, I want to thank all of you who took this assignment really seriously last week. You had a sheet of paper that told you to create 3 questions for me, and some of you did that and did a fantastic job. It was hard for me to sort through some of them and pick the top 10, but that's what I did today, and that's what I'll do again next week. I chose mostly questions that were asked over and over again, but I also picked a couple that were just really I thought were great questions, even though I didn't get them more than once. So remember also that the questions that you create for me today, just like last week, counted as a test grade. And these test grades help me to see how seriously you were. They're a measure kind of how seriously you're taking things right now. And I know it's difficult to stay seriously engaged and very involved when there aren't teachers there to work with you, and when you may or may not necessarily feel like doing it. But remember, at the close of the program or this video today, I'm going to ask you to create questions again, and make sure that you remember when you do this that this is a second test grade, and this is probably one of the only chances that you'll ever have to create your own test grade. So you want to be sure that you're doing the best that you can to create only, you can create more than you want to, more than 3 if you want to, but I'm only asking you to create 3 test grades. And I got some really surprising results back that were really positive, and then I got some that I was a little disappointed. People just chose not to do it at all, or they put silly things down, like who, what, when. That's not a question. So take advantage of this opportunity to create a good grade for yourself, okay? So it's either going to be a 100 or it's not, and there's no middle ground. It's either pass or fail. So be sure that you do a good job, because this is for you, right? And it also helps me to create another news segment next week. All right, so let's go to the first question. So how did I pick them? First of all, I think I went through this already. I picked questions that I knew that I could answer with current news or research that I could conduct, and I just finished that this morning. I picked questions that were common to each pod. So in other words, if a question was repeated, I picked that question for sure. And then I looked for questions that were obviously unique. And if something really stood out to me, then I picked it. So keep that in mind when you're creating your questions for next week. All right. So question number 1 that was repeated several times: is there actually proof that this originated in China? And the answer is yes, there is. In Wuhan province, it's Hubei province in the city of Wuhan, there is actually a biohazard lab that this particular virus was being investigated, and they were doing research on it. And there is evidence that this particular strain of this virus, and they can track it through its genetic profile, came from that province. Now, interestingly enough, and I think this is question number 2, but before I say anything else, let me check. So no, actually question number 3 is the one we're going to talk about, and where it originated. So as far as what animal population. Question number 2, I got quite a bit. What's the difference between a virus and a disease? So over here on the left, we have a lot of different images. These are not actual pictures of them because the pictures aren't nearly so colorful, but this is a way to imagine what they look like with drawings. These are all different kinds of viruses, and if you get up really close, you can see one of them says rotavirus, one of them says herpes, one says bacteriophage, one of them says HIV, but these are all different forms of viruses. And remember, we've already decided pretty much across the science field that viruses are not alive. However, there is a difference between a virus and a disease. Diseases are things, a disease is a classification of illness. It's another word for illness. And not all diseases are caused by viruses. So if you look at this page on the right here, high blood pressure is an example of a disease. Heart disease, an example of disease. Allergies, example of disease. Those are not caused by viruses, right? So viruses are one cause of disease, but disease is a whole global description, I guess you could say, or a category of things that can be wrong with a person. So diabetes, anxiety, arthritis, cancer, those are all diseases. The causes probably are not viral. In other words, it's not from a virus that you get these things, but viruses do cause illness, okay? So let's go to question number 3. Question 3 was about those little anteaters, and I gave you that information last week. And actually, there's been some additional research that has come out. As they continue to do more and more research, they're continuing to find out more and more about this particular coronavirus, COVID-19, and it's now beginning to look like that the emphasis is shifting away from the anteaters and going back to bats. And so, you know, bats have a critical role in the transmission of a lot of these diseases because bats are very unique, not just because they're the only flying mammals, but because they serve as vectors. If you remember that term when we've talked about diseases before, they serve as vectors for the disease. So as far as those little anteaters are concerned, we can pretty much think, let me see if I can get this to work. We can pretty much do this. Look at that, what I figured out how to do. It's probably not coming from these animals primarily, it's coming from bats. The reason we know that now is because the more that they've been able to study this disease, the more they've been able to see that the genetic strain of virus that's in the pangolins is only like 86% the same as COVID-19, but the virus that they have found in bats is about, this particular coronavirus is being in common with one that they found in bats. It's like 99.7% the same. So that would tend to make us think that the real origin has probably again been from bats. Don't you just love it? Question number 4, how do viruses spread? So mostly we've talked about with this particular virus, you know, washing your hands and making sure that you're not coughing or sneezing or, you know, any of those things around other people. So that's the reason for the social distancing. But primarily, and in fact, most of what we know is that viruses affect different parts of the body. So like you can have an intestinal virus, which makes you throw up or have diarrhea. You can have what they call a rhinonasal virus, which means you've got what seems to be a head cold. You can get viruses that we know are from sexual contact, right? So like HIV or, well, I just drew a blank, but anyway, you know what I'm talking about. So through the air, one way viruses are spread, you just inhale them. Contact means you touch a surface and then maybe transfer the virus to yourself by touching, you know, maybe you pick up a pencil that's got a viral, you know, particle on it, and then you put the pencil up on your face and then the virus is on your skin, or you might put the pencil or pen in your mouth because you're thinking about something. You're not really thinking about the fact that you could be infecting yourself with something. So you can transfer it to yourself that way. Primarily it's by touching your places where you have on your face where you've got mucous membranes, so that would be your mouth. And when you think about mucous membranes, you think about membranes that are moist, so that would be your mouth, would be your nose, your eyes. And then sexual contact, bodily fluids, you can transfer viruses that way. And then another way that most people don't think about, but you can transfer it, is on viral particles that are in or on food. So for example, salmonella can be transferred through raw eggs. It can be transferred through on celery if you don't cook your celery or if you don't wash it really well to make sure that it's clean. There are lots of ways to get viruses and bacteria, for that matter, from food transferred into your body. So that's another way that viruses spread. So hopefully that answered your question. So number 5, if this coronavirus has been here since 2018, why is it just now showing up? That should say, why did it just now show up? Okay, so this is a great question somebody asked. I only saw this once, and this is one of those, like I said, I chose it because I didn't see it except once, but I think it's a really good question. So one reason that it may not have shown up until now in great numbers is because it takes a while for viruses to get into a population and then move. And the way that they move is by people traveling, right? So you won't have a virus move through a population because it just shows up. It has to be brought in. And so we may have had quite a few what we call asymptomatic cases in this country. Asymptomatic means that you have it and you don't even know you've had it. You create antibodies, but while you have it, it's possible for you to expose other people to it. So right now there's an estimate out there that says for every case that we have tested and somebody is positive, there may be as many as 80 asymptomatic cases. So that means, let's say you've tested 10, you've got 10 positive tests, right? That means you could have 800 positive tests, but those people don't get tested because they are asymptomatic. They don't even know they've got it. That's one of the ways that this virus spreads so quickly too throughout the population is we have a lot of people, and especially we think now, I just read something today, that little children a lot of times are asymptomatic. They're like little petri dishes running around with everything, and they're going to share it with you. And so one of the most common vectors now may be children, that adults are getting it from their children and grandchildren. So isn't that nice to know? Don't pick up your kids, don't go around your kids, social distance. I don't know how you're supposed to socially distance yourself from a newborn that needs to be fed, right? Not that a newborn would necessarily have it, but you've got little toddlers that still have to be fed. You can't socially distance yourself. Just be aware that you don't need to be wiping their noses with your bare hands, maybe. So another reason that it may have just now have shown up is we didn't know we were dealing with a new virus. I mean, we didn't have any idea. Another reason that it's just now showing up is because in great numbers is because it has gotten into populations, which we're going to talk about in a minute, that have been highly affected because they either are elderly or they have underlying health issues. And so as a result of those people oftentimes living in close quarters, once that virus started, it spread very quickly. We also have a lack of effective and fast testing in this country right now. They're trying to fix that. But one of the things that the testing has already revealed is that we've got a lot of people who have had it that didn't know they've had it, and they're already over it. And so we have a really weird way of reporting too, and that's the last thing on there. Some places are reporting the total number of cases. Some places are reporting the total number of deaths, and not just from COVID-19, but from everything. And they're blaming all of the deaths on COVID-19, which is crazy. People are dying from other things besides COVID-19, but they're lumping all of the deaths during this period of time into one category. So we don't have a really clear-cut set of data at this point that we can point to and say, okay, this is in common, this is in common, or this is in common. And so we have then an effective way to start, either preventing it more effectively or realizing that there's really not much that we can do. So that's question number 5. Great question. A lot of explanation. Sorry about that, but minutes on one slide. All right, number 6, when will stores and restaurants be reopened? Well, we're right now in phase 1 of the reopening in Texas. On May the 1st, the governor said that we could in a limited fashion, reopen some things. Now, not everything is open, so it's not like every tattoo parlor, restaurant, bar, and movie theater, and gymnasium, and all these things opened up on May 1st. That's not what happened. In fact, churches are still closed to people. So, you'd think of all the things that you would probably want to have open very early. Churches might be one of them because people who go to church have missed going to church. I know I have. And so I'm waiting and looking forward to my church opening back up very soon. But the way that they opened it up in Texas is they left it up to the governor left it up to the local business leaders and local like mayors and city councils and county commissioners to kind of decide when they wanted to open what. But on May 1st, restaurants who could make it safe to serve people, which meant they could only have 1/4 of the people in the restaurants and they had to maintain social distancing. They couldn't have certain things on the table like salt shakers, pepper shakers, silverware, menus, all those kinds of things that people would handle. You couldn't have any of that on the table set up before you walked in. You could ask for it, and then you'd get like individual salt packets instead of a salt shaker, that kind of thing. Beauty shops cannot be opened up. Gyms cannot be opened up. Movie theaters could be opened up if you could maintain only 1/4 of the people in the movie theater, and then they would have to distance themselves within the theater where they sit. What else is open? Walmarts and things like that never really closed, but like the Hobby Lobby and Michael's, those kind of craft stores, they opened back up, but they're only allowed to let a certain number of people in. So they're actually literally counting the number of people who come in and then stopping people once the maximum number is in the store that can be in the store safely. And that's determined by your square footage and, maintaining the 6-foot distance between everybody. I've even gone into Walmart recently and they've got arrows on the floor that show which way you should go down the rows so that everybody's traveling in the same direction, and that way you're not meeting anybody head on that you would exchange air with. You're walking behind someone else. I traveled having to go visit and take care of some business for my uncle last weekend. When I got off the plane in Harlingen, which is down around Brownsville, you had to wear a mask in the entire town of Harlingen. You couldn't get off the plane. Well, you had to be wearing one on the plane. You couldn't get on the plane without a mask. You couldn't take it off during the flight. They were serving, if you've ever flown, they serve drinks and, like on Southwest, drinks and peanuts, right? No drinks, no food, no nothing. So that way you didn't have a reason to take your mask off. So it depends on your location as well. So rates of infection, the governor allowed people to, if the rates of infection go up past a certain point, then they can close everything back down. But that's kind of a natural phenomenon that happens when you open things up. The infection's going to go up a little bit, but then it should come right back down. We've also got conflicting data about, which I talked about just a minute ago on the last slide, conflicting data about whether the numbers are truly going up because of new infections or if the numbers are going up because we're doing more testing now and we're finding more people who have had the infection and gotten over it, because that gets reported as well. So it depends on each state. Like Oklahoma is more open right now than Texas is. I have a friend who went up to Oklahoma to visit relatives because she could go up there and get her hair done. The beauty shops are already open up there. So, I mean, it's really kind of crazy what people are doing to be able to get their personal needs met. But, I mean, we do what we do. It also depends on the local population's behavior. So if individuals are acting responsibly, they're maintaining their social distancing, that kind of thing. And then businesses, are they setting up situations where customers can be safe? So like one of the reasons they don't want beauty shops opened, and there was actually a person in Dallas who was arrested last week and put in jail. She's now been freed because the governor said, violators are not supposed to be jailed, because then you're putting them into a jail situation where you may already have COVID-19. Who was thinking about this? Anyway, if the businesses can be run safely, then they're going to continue to allow things to open up. The 18th is the next date that they're having the next opening up. That may not quite be right, but it's about 2 weeks after phase 1 and phase 2. So additional businesses with services would be opening up. So hopefully things like gymnasiums, workout facilities, tattoo. I mean, I want to go get a new tattoo, right? That says COVID-19 survivor. But, those things are going to be opening up again, but gradually. We're not just throwing everything open, right? And that probably makes sense to most people. Okay, next question. Question 7, do they have a cure for the coronavirus? Well, coronavirus, first of all, is, remember, a type of virus. It has a certain shape. There are hundreds of different coronaviruses, and we don't ever focus on a cure for viruses. What we focus on is a kind of a two-pronged approach. We want to develop a vaccine for it if at all possible, and then we want to focus on prevention. The way that you cure it is going to be individual because your own body, once you're exposed to a virus, creates its own antibodies. So you either get exposed to the virus and create antibodies, or you get a vaccine, which causes you to create antibodies. And since every single human being is different, then the antibodies that are created are going to be different. So your antibodies would be similar to, but not exactly like a brother, a sister, a parent, a grandparent, a child, right? So cure is back actually when you recover. That doesn't make any sense. A cure is when you recover. So anyway, that's when you're cured, right? You recover from it, or you don't ever get it. You have antibodies. You're not going to get it, so you don't have to worry about a cure. And again, prevention is the best cure. So that's why we have the restrictions right now for visitation in facilities like ROP, in hospitals, in nursing homes. Like I said, I had to go down to the valley. I traveled 2 days, one day down, and the flights were restricted to one flight in and out of that town every day. So I had to fly down one day, fly back the next. I was there for about 28 hours. I couldn't even go see my uncle. I could go to the facility where he was, and I was probably no more than 500 feet away from him, but I couldn't go in and see him. So it was really kind of depressing. But, we do what we have to do to keep everybody healthy. Number 8, current statistics. So it's kind of hard to say whether these statistics are accurate or not, which is what I was getting at a little bit earlier. So have you been tested? I haven't been. Have I been exposed? How would I know? Do I have antibodies? Well, a test would show that if I could find a place to go get tested, but I don't even know where to go get tested right now. I've been too busy trying to keep up with all of you. So let's look at the worldwide statistics, right? So let's keep in mind that the world population right now is over 8 billion. Okay, B billion. All right. So worldwide, we've had about, this is rounded off, 377, I'm sorry, I'm reading it wrong, 3,770,000 cases. So that's about 0.5% of the world's population has been exposed to this. Out of that, 1.25 million have recovered. So that means, there are still active cases out there. And 264,000 people have died. So that's less than 1% of the people worldwide who have gotten it have had their deaths recorded as a result of that. So this is where the problem with statistics comes in. When you're talking about worldwide and you're hoping that everybody around the world is reporting it the same way, there's no guarantee that these statistics are extremely accurate, but they're probably pretty darn accurate, okay? In Texas, I didn't do the U.S. because I figured we're not living in the U.S. My questions I had were about Texas and about Mexico. And I have no idea what that oh, that's the date. I just typed this about an hour ago and I couldn't even remember what that meant. All right, so in Texas, as of today, 33,385 cases, and that number is climbing. Now, the number is climbing because we're testing people, and every single time somebody has had it and we get a positive, that's adding to the total number of cases. That does not mean that those are active cases. That means that that's the number of people who have had a positive test. They may have had, a lot of them we're finding, are positive tests and they didn't even know they had it. So of that 33,000 plus, a little over 16,000 have recovered. So that's almost 50% of the people who have had it have recovered. So that means a little over 50% of the people that have been reported as cases either still have it or they tested positive, didn't know it, and their numbers got reported incorrectly, just as a positive. So there have been 926 deaths in the state of Texas. That's pretty darn low. That's less than 1%, right? If you look at Mexico, somebody asked about the cases in Mexico, which I thought was, kind of good. That's great. So today, as of today, Mexico, which is has a smaller population, I believe, a little bit under the population of Texas, but I could be wrong about that. But let's look at just comparing the numbers. They've had just over 29,000 cases as of today. 17,781 of those are reported as recovered. And I think the reason that they have so many more of their population that have reported as recovered is because they're not yet testing people who are just, out there and may or may not have had it. But look at the number of people who have died from it. And I think this speaks probably more to the idea that this may be a place, a country, that's reporting all of the deaths. Any suspicious death they're blaming on this. And so I'm not sure how Mexico is reporting theirs. I know how Texas is. But it looks like they've got over 3 times as many people dying from it as we do here in Texas. And that's unfortunate. So let's look at slide number 9. Highest mortality rates. So the U.S. death rate overall from COVID-19 is just below 6%. So that means of everybody who gets it, below 6, just under 6% of people die from it. Now that being said, the highest age group mortality rate is people over the age of 85. So people 85 and older who get it, almost 30% of those people die from it. That's sad, but those people typically have other health impairments at the age of 85. Just being 85 and alive or over 85 is something. But I do know, like I've seen pictures of people on the news who were over 100 who got it and survived. But nearly half of the people who have died, like 49-point-something% of the people over 85 years of age who have died from it have been in nursing homes. Now let's think about why that would be the case. In a nursing home, you've got people living in rooms together. You've got usually 2 people per room. You've got people who are coming in every day taking care of them. So they are bringing COVID-19 in with them, and then the patients are getting it, because these are not patients who are coming into the nursing home with COVID-19 and then spreading it. I know that for a fact because my uncle, like I said, was hospitalized. He went from the hospital in Harlingen into a nursing home, and he had to be in a 2 weeks quarantine in the nursing home, even though he had tested negative for COVID-19, because you can be asymptomatic, right? So he could have had it, tested negative, then developed it, then tested positive, and still been all asymptomatic along the way. So they're keeping people in quarantine, and the reason was because Harlingen has one of the highest rates in the state of Texas for COVID-19 infections, and their hospital had, I don't know, like 85 cases of it or something there, a really high number. So, and maybe it was less, 70%, 70, I don't know. But anyway, they had a high number of cases. And so when my uncle transferred from the hospital to the nursing home because he was getting worse, and there wasn't really anything they could do for him because he has heart disease, so now he's in a nursing home. He had to be in quarantine, in other words, for 2 weeks. Now, as far as people who have, now this is not people over 85, but this is looking at people who had other health impairments, okay, and died from COVID-19. So about 10% of the COVID-19 deaths were people who had heart disease, all right? So of the number of people who've died in the U.S., those who died from COVID-19, about 10% of them had heart disease. So of the people, that's the highest group with other health impairment, right? So of the people who died from COVID-19, about 7% were diabetic. About 6.5% who died from COVID-19 had chronic respiratory disease. So they had something wrong with their breathing. They may have had asthma. They may have had chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, which is related to the heart and the lungs, but they listed as a respiratory problem. They could have had other things wrong with their lungs, but they had respiratory. Chronic meant they had long-term respiratory disease. About 6% of them had hypertension or high blood pressure. And that was something that they were medicated for. So that's how they can track this, is that it was something that, there was a health problem that people were being treated for, and then they got COVID-19. And of the people that got COVID-19, about 6% of them were being treated for high blood pressure. About 5.5% of them had cancer or had had cancer in the past. And the reason that that's important is because most people who have had cancer have had some kind of treatment that impaired their ability to fight off infections. So it interfered with their immune system. And then people who had no previous health issues at all, the number of people who have died from COVID-19 are under 1%, fewer than 1%. Now, it's true that every single one of those people were people who died, and that is a terrible thing, but the fact that a person has no previous health issues puts them in a much better place than any of these other categories, right? Okay. Final question. When will the teachers be back on campus? Well, as you can see, we want to be back right now, but we can't get in. So as soon as possible, we will be back to see you. All right. Now, next week's news. This is, again, it's up to you. You should have a piece of paper in front of you, whether it's a piece of notebook paper or the same form that you got last week. It doesn't matter. Make sure that you put your name on it and that you list 3 questions. You can list more if you want to, but list 3 questions that you would like to have answered. It doesn't have to necessarily be about COVID-19. It could be about anything. If you want to know, about anything about sports, I can tell you right now there's not any sports going on. But if you've got questions about other things you'd like to have answered, let me know. And if I can find it for you, I definitely will. You all have a great weekend. Take care of yourselves. Remember to wash your hands often with soap and water. Keep coughing into your elbow. Keep, sneezing into a Kleenex or whatever you need to do. We don't want this stuff to get started, right? We need to keep it, if there is anybody there that's asymptomatic, we need to keep it under control. If it does get started, that's just going to delay our ability to come back. So we want to keep everybody healthy. Love you guys. I miss you guys, and I'm praying for all of us. Take care. Bye.